When I was a kid growing up, there was one story I adored. My grandmother would tell us the journey of the indigenous peoples and the traverse over the mountains and out to the west coast in search of something very precious.
Raurika, a woman of the west coast who has crossed a high mountain pass, approaches. She brings with her the first Greenstone ads ever to be seen at Aotearoa.
Needless to say, I was hooked. Not so much for these characters, but rather to hear about this mysterious land where their tales unfold. Out here on the west coast, you can't help but feel insignificant. But coming out here changed the way I see this landscape. I wanted to find a way to recreate those forgotten journeys I'd heard about as a kid. But I wanted to do it my way. With 4 friends, mountain bikes and some wishful thinking, we set off to create our own bike adventure. We wanted to see a different side of Aotearoa. A journey connecting New Zealand's heartland over the main divide and out to sea. Now, our story begins like any multi-day trip does, in a rush sea of panic. But with bikes loaded, a few days of food, and 4 straight days of work, we were in pretty good spirits. Our destination was the old gold mining town of Murchison, where we'd begin our 4-day adventure. In Murchison, we just had a pretty good night at the Lazy Cow. Never stayed there before, but it's a pretty sweet little backpackers kind of place. And we have got 144k to do today, about 1,000 meters. So it's a biggish day, big day on full sus mountain bikes for sure. Looking forward to this, should be good fun. And I guess I'll catch up with you on the trail. Our first day riding would take us eastwards, connecting quiet gravel roads before reaching the shores of Lake Rotorua on the border of Nelson Lakes National Park. We would then head north, crisscrossing through the endless vineyards that characterise this region. Our end goal for the day was the sun-drenched town of Motueka in the heart of Golden Bay. Despite the distance, this would be our easiest day of the trip.
Those first few hours riding in that early morning light were just pure excitement. Stoked to have finally started and be seeing this quiet part of the country that not a lot of Kiwis ever see. And as the fog slowly cleared, we glimpsed our first view of Lake Rotorua. And boy, what a sight to behold.
I think your snack game is going to be strong.
First decent break of the day. And what have we done? 63k with 900 or 850, and it's only 10:30.
But there was another reason to be optimistic. We were starting to see some sunshine.
Alex thinks he's found some magic mushrooms, but they are not magic mushrooms. We've got a local guide here in the form of Chris. He seems to know what he's doing.
And continue.
We have just stopped in Tapawera for some food. And fortunately the sun's come out as well, so we're not freezing our asses off anymore, which is pretty good. Yeah, cute little town. Right, well it's 6:30 in the morning. We are just packing up at the little batch we stayed in last night. We've got about 140k to ride today with about 2,500 metres climbing. It's a pretty big day. We're trying to get off a little bit early, so we'll be riding in the dark a little bit, but we've got a pretty big climb. We've got to ride up Takaka Hill first thing. But yeah, it should be pretty sweet. Some kind of tyre-related mechanical.
Might be leaking.
Well, that's not good. As long as it gets up Takaka Hill, then we can deal with it then.
Note for next time. Bring that up.
Bordering Abel Tasman National Park, our second day would begin with a 1,000-metre climb up Takaka Hill and a long descent of the Ramikas, our first stretch of serious single track. Refuelling in Takaka, we'd be heading up the coast before heading inland into the dense forest of Kahurangi National Park. The aim was to make it to a backcountry hut, one of many that litter this area of the country. It wasn't long though before we encountered our first problem of the day.
Yeah. Can we not just ride up? Oh, you were actually not allowed? Oh, I thought there was just like a shuttle optional. Alright, thank you. Wow, looks like I'm getting the shuttle then, lads.
What?
It must only be like a fairly short section, not going to like drop you off at the top. Also past the roadworks,
Probably.
So unfortunately, roadworks were stopping us from safely riding up Takaka Hill, and we'd be getting a lift up. But it wasn't all bad. We got to enjoy the pleasantries of the locals, who were willing to share their own life history of this hill.
Oh, times have changed. Like 40 years ago, the road was actually narrower than where it is in the narrow parts. And the cyclists back in those days, you'd start coming up with Takaka Hill on the other side there, because the trucks were only about 130 horsepower then.
Sadly, we didn't get to hear the rest of that story. Our lift was here. So we said goodbye to our friend, crammed the bikes in, and headed up the hill. Now, call me a purist, but I was pretty gutted we skipped a bit. But lucky for me, we still had a bunch of climbing to do. And shortly we were reminded we were entering our first national park, as well as a very good observation from Alex.
The Kahurangi 500. Less than half of it's in the Kahurangi National Park.
We've been cheated.
Alright, just about to start the Heaphy Track. So we're here, and we're going to be doing this track all the way down. And it's about 30 k's, and it pops out near towards Takaka. Should be pretty good.
Pretty good was definitely an understatement. We were all buzzing to finally get off the roads and onto some single track. And the Ramikas, well, they promised a lot. A green mossy labyrinth that promised to get us and our bikes hella dirty.
This is walking territory down here.
And just like that, we were out of the bush and back onto the road.
Right, so we've just arrived in Takaka after a pretty decent bit of single track along the Ramikas, and it's just such a beautiful day today. The Ramikas was awesome. Some of the best single track I've done in New Zealand, I'd say. Yeah, so we're just getting some lunch here at this bar, and then we've got a bit of a ride out west towards Collingwood. We'll be going up into the Kahurangi National Park, so starting the Heaphy Track. So we've got a lot more to do today, but we're making good time, so I'll catch up with you in a little bit.
With food on our tummies, we were back on the road, and with a pretty cruisy ride up the coast. But just around the corner was what we were all collectively looking forward to. Kahurangi National Park. Entering the Kahurangi is like entering a different world altogether. A mostly untracked wilderness area, forgotten in time, completely wild and uninhabited. We'd be heading up the Heaphy Track, one of New Zealand's great walks, only open to mountain bikes in the off-season. As we climbed, we were quickly absorbed into the heart of the forest. And as the sun slowly started to set, I felt like the luckiest guy in the world. But the lack of light had obvious implications. We'd have to try and find this hut in the dark, and we were facing some bike issues. It wasn't long though before one of us spotted what looked like light off in the distance. New Zealand's backcountry hut system is one of its best kept secrets. With many built by forestry workers in the early 20th century, they now provide a safe refuge for hikers and the odd bikepacker. We're just staying in one out of roughly 1,400 that still exist today. Every hut experience is always special. Just a random collection of strangers here in this pocket of wilderness, tired from the day's travels, exchanging stories over candlelight, and maybe the odd drab of whiskey.
So this is the morning of day 3 of the trip. We stayed at Perry Saddle Hut last night. Arrived here about 6:30, and we actually were planning to stay at 2 more huts away, Saxon Hut. But we kind of got here quite a bit later than we thought we would, and decided just to stay here because there was space. And it was a good choice because we just got to have dinner kind of early, have a good chat, and then get a good night's sleep. Today we have got probably about 130k, and we're finishing the Heaphy and popping out on the west coast, and we'll be staying in a little town called Seddonville in a motel. There'll be quite a lot of bikers here as well that are doing the same thing. That's good. It's good to see other people out doing this kind of stuff. Oh. Our third day riding was the easiest in terms of distance. We'd be continuing on the Heaphy, passing the ever-historic huts on this trail. We'd then have a long descent through native forest down to the west coast. From here it should be a pretty cruisy ride along this remote coastline to the small township of Seddonville, where we had a bed booked for the night. The Heaphy Track forms the only means to travel by foot or bike between Golden Bay and the west coast. It's a landscape of continual change. 1 minute in lush forest, and the very next, barren and desolate. It's a really special kind of place. It's also home to one of the rarest native birds in New Zealand, the Takaka Hill, which, lucky for us, made an appearance that frosty morning. The history of these birds is fascinating.
Considered extinct, they were rediscovered by a doctor hiking the remote area of Fiordland in the 1920s. And through conservation efforts over the decades since, the population has now risen to around 400. I don't know if it was seeing those cute little birds, or the fact that I could start feeling my hands again. Either way, I was pretty damn high on life. Late morning, we finally glimpsed a pretty exciting sight. The shimmering blue horizon of the Tasman Sea. And before you knew it, we popped out of that dense forest and found ourselves on a beach. None of us really anticipated how challenging this bit was going to be. Sand, water crossings, and a deceptive amount of climbing were all items for the day. But at least we got to enjoy that view.
So we've done most of the Heaphy today, and we are now here. And then we're just going to bike along the road to Kahurangi, get some food.
So back on tarmac and setting a pretty speedy pace, we were just enjoying that late afternoon sunshine and letting those kilometres roll by. But there was definitely a couple of things on our minds. A hot plate of food, and just how big the next day was gonna be. The forest is a funny place at night. A sensory overload. Every trickle of water, snap branch, magnified. None of us really had a lot to say that morning. Just enjoying the moment. We're following the Old Ghost Road, a historic trail used by gold miners and prospectors. Now a recreational mountain bike and hiking trail, this would take us through the Stern Valley and a big climb up to Lyle's Saddle, the highest point. We'd eventually pop out on the state highway that would take us back to Murchison, where our car was waiting. And now that we could finally see a bit better, it didn't mean the riding got any easier. Fairly technical, and often with a pretty big drop right by your side. But those views, you couldn't beat.
Made it. So this is the first hut on the Heaphy, Specimen Point, and we're about 20 k's in right now. Absolutely stunning.
I don't know if I've ever seen such lush green forests as I have here on the west coast. Unspoiled by human activity, except for the sounds of our pedalling and the crunch of our tyres. With the sun on our backs and surrounded by this pristine nature, life couldn't have felt more peaceful.
That was a lot of fun.
The second hut provided our first decent break of the day.
So this is Stern Creek hut.
A chance to reflect on the day so far and get that perfect group photo. Or not. It was getting pretty clear that the past few days were starting to take its toll. Not just on us, but on our gear.
Is it not broken?
It kind of looks like it should just clip back in. But it's not clipping back in.
Shoes or no shoes, we still had to get to the top of Lyle Saddle. But there was one little obstacle in our way.
Look at that technique.
It wouldn't be a proper trip without some hiker bike. It said it was only 60 meters, but let me tell you, when you're carrying a 14 kilo bike plus gear for a multi-day trip, it felt like 600.
Wow. Holy shit. Oh.
But you forget all about that when you see what you've been working towards. At this point, we're starting to realise why most people ride this trail in the other direction. But it didn't really matter. But I still had a big smile on my face. We're making our way to the highest point on this trail, but not before we came across a man in the woods with a few sticks of dynamite.
All clear here.
Fuck it out.
Ghost Lake Hut marks the high point of the day, and with views stretching from the main divide to the Tasman Sea, it's a pity we didn't have more time to soak this in. We had to get off this mountain, and time definitely wasn't on our side. Sometimes it feels like a trip is a building of momentum, a rising tide to a particular moment. When that ridgeline opened up before us, and with the sun about to sneak behind that horizon, it felt like this was that moment. A perfect line carved out of the side of the mountain.
This is by far the best day's riding I've probably done ever.
Like,
It's crazy.
this is just about made that uphill worth it.
Before we knew it, it was over. We ride well into the night, eventually making it out of the bush and back into civilization.
Right, well, we've just finished.
We had a couple of hours road riding ahead of us, and to be honest, it was just nice to be alone with my thoughts, reflecting on such an awesome day. But as the hours rolled by, you couldn't help but question where this town was. Finally, out of the darkness came the confirmation. 4 days and 500 kilometers later, we were back where we started.
There we have it.
Our little adventure had come to an end.
Wait a minute.
In many ways, the biking took a back seat on this trip. It was more often the simple moments, the hardships, and the camaraderie built from these experiences with friends that brought the biggest smiles. Life in its purest sense. Driving home, and with fatigue drifting me off to sleep, there was just one thought on my mind. Work tomorrow's gonna suck dick.
Alex just looking at the boss. What are you doing in front of me? What? This is rather inappropriate right now, to be honest. Like,